All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies. Dad, I don't sound like that anymore.
I know, but you were only 3 years old when you did that, and you were cute, and people love it. Do you want to try it again?
Sure. Healthy babies.
No, it's Healthy Births, Happy Babies.
Happy births, healthy babies.
Healthy Births, Happy Babies.
Happy births.
Oh, no. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. Are you enjoying that intro as much as I am? I laugh every time I put these episodes together now that we redid that intro. Nico, all being grown up now, all grown up at 7, but still getting the the name of the podcast wrong. I love it. It's so funny. I hope you enjoy it too. But anyway, I am Dr. Jay Warren. I'm your host. I am also a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here in San Diego. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about pelvic floor health, but specifically, we're going to be talking about recovering from incontinence, which is something that many, many, many women deal with and suffer from after the birth of a child or multiple children, I should say, not childs. And my guest today is Laura Vidal Borrell. She is a mom herself. She had problems with incontinence after her 2 boys were born and found her way to pelvic floor PT. She figured out ways of being able to not have problems sneezing, coughing, and peeing. So she then, as being part of the tech industry before and product development, she left that job and she developed HappySneeze. And HappySneeze is a team of pelvic floor specialists that have come together to, one, teach about pelvic floor health, but also programs to be able to teach how women can overcome this. And there's a patient in my office who works along with HappySneeze. She's helping doing some of the development work on the back end, on the tech end of things, and asked if I could look at things. And I looked at it, and I think it's a great program. I'm not involved with the company at all. I only got on a call to be able to give them my feedback about what worked well and what might be able to improve, but I don't receive any financial compensation for anything with HappySneeze. I just think their information is solid, it's grounded, it's really easy for women to learn about it and then also implement. So I wanted to bring Laura on to talk about, one, her journey and what she experienced, so that if you yourself are experiencing this or a mom that you know is experiencing this, then you can learn more about it and possibly get some help, because it doesn't have to be a lifelong nuisance that unfortunately many women are told. So I'm going to switch over to our conversation in a second, but if you haven't already become a subscriber to the podcast, I would love for you to subscribe. That's going to allow you to get notifications of when the new episodes are out, so you can not only listen to the whole library I've created of 150 episodes now, but also anything new that comes out, you'll be able to, as a subscriber, get those notifications. But then also, secondly, if you haven't rated and reviewed the podcast, it would mean the world to me if you took a moment to do that. You can give it up to 5 stars. I would love a 5-star rating if you think this is a good podcast, you like it, you think it's providing value. That really allows this podcast to be seen by more and more people that might be needing this information and wanting this information to have a better pregnancy and postpartum and helping out with their kiddos and parenthood. And if you could read or leave a review of just some comments about what you like about it, that would also mean the world to me. So thank you in advance for doing that. If you've already rated and reviewed, thank you, thank you, thank you. So with that, let me now switch over to my conversation with Laura. All right, Laura, welcome to the podcast. I'm happy to be talking with you today.
Happy to be here, Dr. J.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking a lot over the last couple months about your project and the like. And I said in the intro that we got put together because one of my clients that I'd worked with in her pregnancies is doing work with your company and what you're putting out, what we're going to be talking about today, and put us together so I could kind of see what you're doing. And because you got such great information, I thought this was a great conversation to have for our listeners about what it is that you're doing at HappySneeze. And so thank you for being here. And I think the best way to start would be, before we start talking about everything that is going on, like just explain to me how you got involved in your company, HappySneeze, and that's going to lead into why we're going to be talking about what we're talking about today.
Of course. So I'm obviously a recovering incontinent. Otherwise, why would I get myself into this? So I have two children. They are 4 and 7, two boys. And since the first one was born, I've been licking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something we talk about very much. I was never asked about it. And for the first, postpartum, I kind of like let it go because it was so much, everything was so much. By the second child, I knew what was coming, and I saw that it wouldn't resolve until I did something about it. So I got proactive. I got help from a physical therapist, and I just had a very hard time sticking with it. My life was too busy. I got back to work after 3 months, and I just kept going with it. And then there was a moment when my kid was 3 that I realized like I was avoiding picking him up, because every time I would pick him up, I would pee my pants. And I had enough. I didn't want to deal with that anymore. So I decided to get educated, and I read tons of research, and I realized that there's a lot of knowledge out there that hasn't reached the hands of the moms of today. So we're still doing Kegels, which is an exercise that was developed by Dr. Kegel in the 1940s, which works in some cases. And now we know a lot more than that. So I saw it as my mission, why is this happening to all of us? All my mom friends were having the same problem. And I thought I could put my technology background to work and get all this knowledge and science that's being developed in academia and in clinical settings in the pockets of the moms of today. And this is how HappySneeze was born. We've created an app that brings evidence-based physical therapy methods to moms in a friendly way for our everyday life.
Fantastic. So it was, you experienced incontinence like right from the first birth. It wasn't the second.
It was the first one.
Wow.
I was going out with my friend Whitney, who was a mom with boob problems like myself. We met in a breastfeeding circle in South Park here in San Diego. And, we're in Mission Bay and we're getting ready with our babies, we put them in our carriers, and I walked down the sidewalk. I stepped down the sidewalk and that was like my first one. I was so shocked. Yeah. I was seriously shocked. And I barely knew Whitney at that point. And there's like pee trickling down my legs. I don't know what to say. And she has a baby too. So we just keep walking. And it's so stressful, right? It's like every step you're like holding it. And it was a terrifying experience. And it really stopped me from working out or exercising during my first postpartum. The funny thing is that she was going through the same. So now that we talk about it, she was going through the same experience, and we never said anything. So that was my first kind of accident, which is toddler way of saying I'm peeing my pants. And
Moms speak for peeing your pants, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So is it, and did you notice it was getting better at all as postpartum like progressed and then it restarted with the second, or did it not improve at all?
Yeah, good question. So there is my experience and what research says. So it improves. This period is called, they call it transitional incontinence. So
Okay.
for some moms, some lucky moms, it actually gets resolved and it goes away. For those who after 6 months are still leaking, it mostly chronifies. So
Okay.
it will not go away and it will tend to get worse over time as our body changes, and especially if you have another child, it will get worse.
Right. And so that story you told about like you found yourself not wanting to lift up your 3-year-old, was that your youngest was 3 or your oldest was 3?
Yeah, my youngest was 3
Okay.
and my oldest was 6 by then. And it had already happened with my first kid. So it had been happening all along. Just my second kid, he moves a lot. So he's super wiggly and it's like you grab him and he'll be all over you. And this like need to keep balance. Our pelvic floor is part of our stability system. So if it's out of whack, when you have to be continent and stay in balance at the same time, it's like a terrible thing for us moms. So I avoided lifting him. Yeah.
Right. So it had been going on for 6 years or less the pregnancy of the first
Yeah.
one. So years and
Yeah.
years, because I think that's a common, I don't want to say misconception, it's a common experience that women really don't realize that this is something that could be helped, that can be worked with. It's much more common than is reported. So women will feel alone in it. I mean, do you have the incidents? Like how many women typically are experiencing beyond the transitional incontinence?
Yeah. So there's lots of data out there around it. The latest study, which has looked at thousands of women between 2012 and 2016, puts stress urinary incontinence, which is incontinence you have when you sneeze or jump, at 42%.
Oh, wow.
This is a massive number.
Yeah.
We know that the incident that causes it is mostly pregnancy and childbirth. Could be other things, but it's minimal. So it's a really large amount of women. Like if you're with women in the room, just look around, about half of them is
Right. And that's beyond the first 6 months. Transitional incontinence is
yes.
defined as the 6-month period postpartum.
Yeah. So transitional incontinence would be incontinence that would likely resolve by itself as the body heals postpartum.
Okay.
After that, after 6 months, then it would be considered stress urinary incontinence. And that is at 42% at the
Right.
moment.
And what are the most common sorry?
42% of adult women.
Adult women. What's the most common triggers for it? I mean, you mentioned like just even stepping off the curb, but most women are thinking of like, all right, I can't jump on the trampoline or maybe even running, but it can be as little as just stepping off a curb.
Yeah, that's right. So any unexpected loss of stability can produce a leak. So tripping, stepping down a curb, having to go and catch a child, all those things will make you leak. Then the usual suspects, jumping. So jumping jacks are like no-nos, jump rope, no-nos. Anything where your arms are not stuck to your body are just big lickers, big licking moments. Yeah. And then jumping and coughing. I've heard like a lot of moms that had COVID this year, they had a really hard time. Yeah. And then another interesting one is yelling. So I would love to hear from other moms, but the glottis and the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are all connected, are part of the same system. So when you yell, you create pressure down and that makes you leak. So for any of us with toddlers that tend to run into the street, that's another well-known incident.
Right. So it's not even just the bolting after them to make sure they're safe and
Exactly.
like yelling as you're getting them as there's like, stop.
That's right.
Are there other like common symptoms that go along with it, or other areas that might be involved that is along with the incontinence that might be able to be worked with as well?
Yeah. So stress incontinence is just a very kind of obvious symptom. There's like, hey, you're leaking, but around it, some moms may have other symptoms. They may have pain or discomfort. For some of them, like sex is totally out of the picture. There may be back pain that can be related to postural and just postural adjustments happen during pregnancy that have not been corrected, or trauma that has happened during birth. And you can speak to that a lot better than I can. And then there may be prolapse, which is when the sexual organs descend out. So it could be a bladder prolapse, a vaginal prolapse, or a rectum prolapse. That's common too. So any of the symptoms may be coexisting with incontinence.
Okay. And almost sometimes it's the opposite, or the opposite way is that a woman's having, say, like lower back pain for a long time after having kids, that they're seeking either help from me, like as a chiropractor or a pelvic floor PT. And then in asking other questions, the incontinence is part of it as well. So I bring that up because sometimes the incontinence, whether it's like that women are kind of told by another older generation, like, oh, that's just how it is, and you just have to deal with it. That's the price of being a mom, or they're embarrassed about it and aren't talking about it, can know that these other things are all interrelated and can make a huge difference, like in quality of life, because you're able to, not that we want to give them permission to yell at their kids, but can yell and run and step off a curb without worrying about leaking, as well as like the lower back with the pelvic floor and possibly even prolapse issues, because it's all so complex with the anatomy and the trauma that can happen there during childbirth.
It is. It's all a system, and it's so related, right? And functionally, every piece of our bodies connects to the other piece of our bodies in anything we do, right?
Right.
Exercise, during everyday movements, during sex, during everything. So that's why, as we consider ourselves birth workers too. We team up with midwives, we team up with chiropractors, with obviously pelvic physical therapists, which are the source of our work, because we are allies for the moms, and we get to see things that, or our questions are an access to resolve problems that they may not be open to talking about, or they may not even be aware that they're solvable.
Right.
So these kind of conversations are amazing, I think, to just generate awareness and education for moms. I think something that's really important in what you just said is there is this very specific window, birth to 6 months, which is when the chances to recover are the highest. Okay. After that window, it is a lot harder. It's like being run over by a truck. If you take care of it 6 months later, you're probably gonna limp for the rest of your life, right?
Right.
Other data point that I would like everybody to remember is that pelvic physical therapy has success rates of 61 to 91%. So when you take care of your pelvic floor postpartum, you have very high chances of getting better, of getting very well, or almost as well as you were before. Okay. And there's different degrees of everything. But if you take care of it in this window, your chances of recovery are really, really high. Okay. And seeing a physical therapist, if you have the chance to do that, please do that. Like speaking to every mom, okay? They are the professionals who can assess your pelvic floor, who can recommend a course of treatment, who are empathetic about your life and will create something for you that will work with your life. Okay, so just when you make your postpartum list of everything you need to know, when you create your baby shower list, all of that, please put a pelvic physical therapist on it, because they are the gold standard for pelvic floor recovery.
I can agree with you more about this, because it almost really should be an essential evaluation, at least an evaluation during this time. But at least in my experience working with so many women postpartum, there's so many things going on, especially in those first 3 months, just as a new mom, trying to figure everything out with breastfeeding and recovering from pregnancy as well as childbirth, like oftentimes that should be included in a pelvic floor, but a lot of times you're doing so much during that time that it can get backburnered. And that's in our conversations that we've had before about that. How do we plant that seed, that awareness that, all right, this is something to just put on the list to get checked off, to be able to get that kind of help, rather than it being something that, like your experience of, it was years that went by and you missed that window. And obviously like things can be helped afterwards, but to be able to have it so much sooner, I think is so key.
It is. And what we've discovered, speaking to the tons of moms that we speak to all the time, is the hardest part is actually getting set up for it. So if you do that pre-work while you are pregnant, while you are getting ready, right? And you know who is in your neighborhood, you understand the cost, you understand if you have coverage or not and what it takes to get coverage. If you understand how much it costs with or without coverage, you even understand if they will come to your house or you have to go and visit them. Getting ready while you are getting ready is 90% of the work. So again, just as you do your prep, right? Get your lactation consultant on call, because it's, it goes by the minute, and get your pelvic physical therapist figured out so that when and if you need it, she can be a call away.
Right. Can we back up a step, and can you explain like what about childbirth is leading to these problems? And by understanding that, maybe we can, I don't know, shed some light on things that can be done preventatively.
Yeah, good question. So there's preventative measures that moms can take while they are pregnant. So the first one is posture. If your body is out of alignment when you're both standing or when you're sitting, your pelvic floor may be supporting extra work and extra pressure from your abdominal organs. So we tend to tilt our pelvis forward, and the pelvis is a bit like a shelf for our organs. So if we tilt it forward, then all the weight is on the pelvic muscles, which are a softer tissue. So the first thing is really postural. The second thing to do is we are trained to do Kegel exercises. Do your Kegels, right? And this is like shoulder shrugs, if you think about it, right? It's like, hey, you need to have strong shoulders. And what we tend to create with that is lots of tension in our pelvic floor. And then when it's time to push a baby out, if we haven't learned to actually release those muscles and have long muscles, the pelvic floor becomes a wall. So it makes the descent a lot harder, and it is more likely to tear. So part of the training is not only, having a strong and supportive pelvic floor, which we can get doing activations and Kegels, it is also learning to release and have long muscles, okay?
Right.
So that would be number 2. And then number 3, which is surprising to most of us, is actually having regular and soft bowel movements. When we are constipated, we carry extra weight on our pelvic floor, and we strain, which puts tons of pressure on the muscle. So, and I wish I knew this, because I totally did that with my first kid. I was so horribly constipated, and I never put 2 and 2 together. So managing constipation and staying regular is a protective measure for your pelvic floor.
Fantastic. Because those are, the Kegeling, I think, gets a lot of attention, especially if a woman's had a first birth and are having like incontinence issues and or like even prolapse issues. Then the knee jerk is like, oh, you didn't Kegel enough during your pregnancy, or you need to in the next. And part of that's true because we want it strong, but we also want it loose and in order, and not overly tight. So as you said, that wall they have to push through. And I've seen a lot of women that were like doing a lot of CrossFit, a lot of runners in the pregnancy, they were very fit for birth, but the pelvic floor didn't open up, and they had a lot of problems postpartum, and maybe even a cesarean, because even though the pelvis was aligned, the pelvic floor wouldn't open because they were maybe not over Kegeling, but that might have been part of it. So that aspect of like, yes, we get the strength of the tensing, but then also learning to let it go so that you're not pushing against it during labor.
Exactly. We're trying to replace strengthening the pelvic floor by having a pelvic floor that's supple and responsive. So
Okay.
you want the pelvic floor to do what it needs to do at every moment, right? And it's a very smart muscle. So there's moments where it needs to open and let go. And there's moments where you want it, to be responsive and continent, right? So being educated around those movements is a first step to not overdoing Kegels, actually.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's through that pushing for the childbirth that will put like damage into the pelvic or into the pelvic floor musculature that then either recovers in that 6 months or it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you can be proactive about the recovery. This is our message, right? So you can be proactive about your recovery during those 6 months and after. So that's an important message too, right? The first 6 months are foggy state we live in. And if you have done the pre-work and you can, be proactive during these first 6 months, amazing. If not, postpartum is forever. So it can always get better. Okay. And I took serious care of it 6 years postpartum, which, believe it or not, is the national average. So I'm a by the book case.
Is that right?
It is. It is 6 years to bring it up with our doctors. And I'm a lot better than I was. Right. So for me, it's totally manageable right now. I would be considered like a very light incontinent, and I'm okay unless I'm super tired or it's a massive jolt to my system, right? But I am 90% better than I was. So there is, every moment is a good moment to take care of incontinence.
Right. There was a story that I heard of. It was a grandma that, having learned about her daughter's pelvic floor journey postpartum and getting help, started thinking like, well, I've had like chronic low back pain like ever since. She wasn't having incontinence issues, but she in her early 60s started doing pelvic floor rehab, and it totally changed her lower back pain that she thought was just either I had to deal with it, and now that I'm older, I'm gonna have to deal with it more. But although she didn't have incontinence, but that is a great story of it's never too late. And part of the reason why we're doing this conversation is like, hopefully you don't have to wait that long. That you can hear about it now and be preventative and then proactive, and then also like do the work necessary so that doesn't have to be any longer of an experience than necessary.
Yeah. And some of our happiest clients are actually later in life. And they have a lot of time for themselves, and they're active women. And we have like this, we have this client called Linda, and she would like write to us all the time while she was doing the program because she was so happy, right? She would go, oh my goodness, I did join my dance class today and I didn't lick at all. And then the next week she would send another message and say, and I didn't even use a pad today. It's been years,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting. It's never too late to take care of it.
Well, in our last minutes, tell us a little bit about the program, the HappySneeze program.
Yeah, so HappySneeze is a mobile app, and which means you can do the program from home at your own convenience. And it is 50% education and 50% practice of pelvic floor movement within real life tasks. Okay, the pelvic floor works all the time for you. So you will learn what it is and how it works. And then you will also learn how to engage it in a way that's protective and that it keeps it supple and responsive during movements like lifting weights, so lifting your kids or lifting groceries, or going up and down. So for example, moving laundry from your washing machine up to the dryer, or walking fast, or if you have to jump, right? So you learn proactive strategies to not leak, and also just postural and I would say always on habits so that you can stay dry during your day. It takes about 6 weeks to complete, and you can just stay engaged to keep practicing. Yeah, and it takes about 10 minutes a day that become just thoughtless by the end of it because it's become a habit.
Well, and that was one of the things I first noticed about your program when we first started talking, and then you asked for my feedback and I was poking around, that it wasn't just like one little page about this is the pelvic floor, why it's important, what probably happened to you, and then just a list of exercises that you would like lay on the ground and do and have to have, whether it's 10 minutes or a half hour to do every single time. Like it was one, so educational, as you said, but really functional around these are things you can do when you're lifting your baby. These are things you can do and how to do natural movements you're going to be doing every single day. So it made it super practical versus some women are overwhelmed by, okay, I got so many things going on and then I got to add in a 20-minute exercise routine as well. I mean, obviously it takes time, but you've done a really good job, I think, at putting it into really practical terms and in a practical space so that moms are always working on it or always have the potential of working on it rather than waiting, like trying to get up early and then the kids wake up early and they can't do their exercises, or, okay, since I didn't get them in the morning, yeah, or I'll do them at the end of the day so that when I do get on the floor, like I don't have a kid crawling all over me, right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was, I guess, the mom contribution to the program, of like the layer over the science, which is none of us has time for a workout unless you really liked working out before getting pregnant. Most of us it's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that the pelvic floor works all the time and life is full of opportunities to engage it thoughtfully. So we really build a program over everyday movements, which we call happy tasks. So
Mm-hmm.
chopping veggies is a happy task, doing laundry is a happy task, sitting in the car is a happy task. So there's always an opportunity to be aware and be mindful about the pelvic floor.
Good. So where can people find out more about it? Like, where would you like to send them so they can continue the conversation and learn more about like this issue?
Sure. So our website is www.happysneeze.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at the HappySneeze program. Right now, we are working on our mobile app and we are accepting beta users. So if you go on our website and you join our wait, we will send you an invitation and we will love to have you. Something that I really want to mention is that we are very data driven. So all the feedback and everything you contribute to the program makes it better for the moms that come after you. So we love to engage with our users and keep adding, seriously, we keep adding science to this issue, which is very underrepresented.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time today. This is a great conversation. I'd love to like maybe talk with your team again and talk kind of like nuts and bolts anatomy and things like that. If you'd like to have the team come back on, because that conversation that we had before, like I learned so much from just myself as a practitioner. And I think our listeners could benefit from that as well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us.
Right. And don't forget, I have 2 free offers for both moms and dads. First, for the moms, I have my 40 ways of connecting with your baby during pregnancy that you can get on my website at drjwarren.com/40ways. That's 40 ways. And for the dads, I have the 9 myths about becoming a dad that is also available on my site at drjwarren.com/9 myths. That's the number 9 myths. So both moms and dads are covered. Go check them out. I hope you enjoy them.